That was the mighty Dimebag, Darrell, Abbott, and Pantera with the solo and outro to FLOODS from their 1996 album, The Great Southern Trendkill, coming in at number 19 on Guitar World Magazine's Top 100 Solos of All Time. I absolutely love this album. It's easily my favorite Pantera album, one of the heaviest and most uncompromising albums to come out of the 90s. That said, it's one of the more polarizing albums in Pantera's catalog. Some like it, some love it, like me, and well, some don't. And that's cool, I get that. It was a bit of an experimental album for Pantera at the time, and it was rife with recording difficulties, including Phil Anselmo's painkiller and heroin addiction becoming a major problem within the band at the time. Anselmo actually recorded the vocals separately in a different studio at a different time than his bandmates, so they really had no input as far as how the vocals were going to come out, and no idea what to expect from Anselmo. An absolute rage fest is what he gave them, and it was remarkably heavy for the time. It's easily the most violent, dark, and unhinged album in their entire catalog, and that's how I like my metal: dark, unhinged, and angry. Pantera pulled off something that few other metal bands ever achieved, at least mainstream metal bands. They actually got progressively heavier the more popular they got. And that couldn't have been easy. Major record company pressure surely was pushing them in a direction closer to Metallica, probably their biggest genre competitor at the time in the mainstream metal market. Metallica had pretty much softened their sound to some degree by this point and were selling millions more albums than Pantera at the time. And surely their record company wanted a piece of that action and all the money that comes with it. And sadly, as far as musical integrity goes, what the record company wants, the record company usually gets. Pantera, much to their credit, said to hell with that and made the music they wanted to make with no compromises. Now, I'm going to say something that you may disagree with, but hey, it's an opinion and we all have them. And that said, I fucking love Metallica. Up to a point, the Black Album being that point, but I love Pantera more. I'd like to think that if Pantera wanted to write an Unforgiven or Nothing Else Matters or Enter Sandman, they easily could have. I think they were the better band in the 90s, personally. Hetfield is a great metal vocalist, but Phil Anselmo is better. He has way more range. Kirk Hammett is a great metal guitar player, but Dimebag Darrell is much better. Vinnie Abbott is easily a better drummer than Lars Ulrich, but I won't get into whether Rex Brown is better than Cliff Burton because he wasn't. But that's 3 of 4. Pantera, however, were 100% uncompromising. They made the music they wanted to make. If it didn't bring them the kind of massive success Metallica had, so be it. They would not cave. They were never going to mellow, and that's why they just kept getting heavier and heavier album after album. They were all on the same page musically, despite other internal difficulties within the band. But, that's just my opinion. Don't crucify me, Metallica fans. Those first 4 Metallica albums are unmatched by almost any other band at the time or since. I had read somewhere actually that when Metallica's Black Album was released, Pantera were in the process of writing Vulgar Display of Power. They heard the Black Album and couldn't believe their good luck. Here was their main metal rival at the time going softer. Now, there are still some pretty heavy tunes on the Black Album, but overall it was pretty polished and pretty mainstream. I was about 27 when the Black Album came out, and I remember being seriously let down. This was not the Metallica that I knew and loved. And when the album went to the top of the charts, and when I saw my 12-year-old brother-in-law and his friends getting into Metallica, along with every other 12 and 13-year-old boy in the world, I knew something was up. And it was time to bail on this band. And so Pantera it was for me going forward when I needed my metal fix. And like I said, they knew it as well. They knew that they were going to take over the mantle of the heaviest band in the world as far as mainstream metal goes. Metallica had opened the door for Pantera, and Pantera were going in for the kill with their album Vulgar Display of Power. An album absolutely front-loaded with 6 of the heaviest metal tunes ever recorded. Anyway, Pantera just kept crushing it album after album, getting heavier and heavier with each album, like I said. And they did it their way, not the record company's way. They made the albums that they wanted to make, and when it came time to write and record the Great Southern Trendkill, they had a decision to make, because metal music at the time in the mid-90s was generally dying. Outside of the underground, they were pretty much it in 1996, 95. Rap metal, nu metal, grunge had pretty much taken over, and Pantera either needed to join the fray, continue what they were doing, or experiment and try something new. And that's exactly what they did. But in the process, they continued the trend that they had sown on their previous 3 albums. They got heavier still, and no nu metal rapping. Thank God. They pretty much own the mainstream metal market at this point, despite that market having grown smaller. And they produced the best album in their catalog, in my opinion. Revolver magazine and website sums up my feeling pretty well with regards to this album. The Great Southern Trendkill was Pantera at their most pissed off, stubborn, and subversive. At a time when Korn, Marilyn Manson, and Tool were pioneering new MTV-friendly styles of metal, and even Metallica were skewing into the alternative, Pantera became less accessible and more fucking hostile, producing their most extreme and abrasive album to date. And that's very well put. Anyway, on to what I guess one could call an apocalyptic metal ballad, Floods. Just a devastatingly heavy tune. You know, not fast, thrashing heavy, just dark, menacing, and doom heavy. Pantera's magnum opus, their Stairway to Heaven, I suppose. It's tuned down to C sharp. That is some serious down tuning, a step and a half. Strings flopping all over the place. I use 10 gauge strings, and I suppose if I were to change my strings and put heavier gauge strings before down tuning, it would make it easier to play, but I like the challenge. I also hate changing strings, especially on this thing with the Floyd Rose system. A buddy of mine at work mentioned to me that he's in his happy place when it's string changing day. Personally, I'd rather chew on rocks than change my guitar strings. I change them when they break. I actually prefer the sound and the tone of the slightly muted older strings. I find brand new strings just too bright for my taste. But maybe I'm just talking myself into that mindset because I hate changing strings so much. Anyway, great solo. One of Dimebag's, obviously one of Dimebag's greatest solos, thus its inclusion on this list. This one's all about the melody and the pinch harmonics. One of the few solos that Dimebag actually composed. He usually went in the studio and improvised and picked the best of numerous takes or pieced together different bits that worked. This one he sat down and composed, and it's easily one of his best for sure. And that outro, god damn, I could listen to that outro forever. It's just gorgeous. There's actually a video on YouTube of that outro on a loop for 3 hours, and it has nearly 200,000 views. So I guess I'm not the only one who loves that outro. Well, that's it. Great solo, well deserving of its spot on this list at number 19, and it was a lot of fun to learn and play. And we're coming back next week with some Jimi Hendrix, and hope you guys are well in your little guitar corner of the world. And we'll see you next time. Ciao.